What's up, everybody? The wait is finally over and totally over. Left at Wall is available now, right now. You can get Left at Wall on Apple TV, Google Play, YouTube Movies. You can get it on demand. You can buy it on DVD. The wait is totally over. Just type in Left at Wall on your search bar on your smart TV, and you can find a bunch of ways to get it. You can watch it now. Again, that's Left at Wall, wherever you get your movies. Episode 74, Jess Pettitt. Jess Pettitt is a speaker, author, and researcher. Recently, she took a deep dive into Project 2025. Somebody had to. I first met Jess on the NACA circuit, which is basically the college performance circuit, many, many years ago. Okay, maybe not that many years ago. I've always enjoyed hearing her take on things and was curious, especially after her 2025 project, to know her assessment right about now. Please welcome to the show, Jess Pettitt. Jess Pettitt, how are you? It's been a long time.
I am doing great, and it has been a long time, but the cool thing about adult friendships is that you can often just pick right back up where we were.
Just pick right back up. Yeah. The world had a lot in store since the last time we spoke. It was a different era the last time we were in close communication.
Very true. I think probably Obama was president, so it has been a hot second. But what's amazing about history and social problems is that we just follow history, right? And so the years of Obama really have led us to where we're at today. So it's really not that big a time in the grand scheme of things, and here it comes.
Yep, absolutely. Well, we're going to jump into all of that, but let's start further back. So tell me a little bit about your origin story. Where'd you grow up? What'd you do? How did you come to be the Jess Pettitt we know and love today?
The Jess Pettitt that you know and love today. I am originally from Texas. I don't know how far back we want to go. I went to college in Arkansas, a small liberal arts college. I grew up with a lot of privilege in a primarily white neighborhood that I thought I was middle class. This is very funny. I thought I was middle class in retrospect because I didn't have a helicopter pad at my house.
Wow. Okay. Jeez.
So my closest friends, they had helicopter pads. So we didn't even own a boat.
Wow.
So,
what did your folks do?
My mother was a elementary school teacher. Sorry, I was a high school teacher. My father was a serial entrepreneur, and they both died very, very young. And after closing out my parents' estate at 19, I realized that we lived outrageously beyond our means because neither of those things had big salaries. So it was.
It wasn't helicopter pad money.
No. It wasn't even, we shouldn't be living in this town money. But good schools, and my mother taught in the school district. So I think that's what happened. Yeah. So that was kind of a rude awakening to find out, like, oh, we're not poor, but we're not middle class, but we're not rich, but we are, well, and then I'm raising my brother. So we are definitely dropped a tax bracket after that until I went to college. And then I went to grad school in South Carolina. I guess we're still doing origin story, where I have a master's in crisis management and higher education. And I worked on a number of different college campuses, and that was great. Loved it. Got fired a ton, largely because I was in charge of figuring out how the university could better serve marginalized populations or communities, and it turns out they didn't really want to know. So I get fired, go get another job, get fired, go get another job, get fired.
Well, what are some of the things you would suggest that would push buttons? Like, what are some? I mean, you don't have to get super specific, but like, what are some of the things where you'd be like, we should go here, and they'd be like, we're going to replace you?
Mostly just acknowledging it's the same thing that's being talked about in the news today is people don't want to hear about inequitable opportunities. And if they do, they get really defensive about it and feel like they are now experiencing an inequitable opportunity because something has shown up. So pointing out discipline records, pointing out financial aid discrepancies, pointing out housing discrepancies, all of that was very upsetting.
Mm-hmm.
I would do it again. I'm now also older, and I might do it again, but I might also do it in a different font. Like managing up, thinking about my supervisor. I wasn't doing any of that. I was just doing my job. So then after getting fired the third time, I started my own business doing DEI consulting and speaking. While I had been working at NYU is when I started my kind of stand-up comedy jaunt, I guess, which coincided with the Bush and Kerry election. So I did a lot of the MC work for the Democratic Party's comedy fundraisers, largely because they needed a nobody to wear a watch and keep the show on track. And that's what I did. Yeah. So, and now I started my business in 2005. And now I'm 50 and married and live in California and have rescue dogs and doing the corporate thing and trying to keep conversations going. So it's the least I can do.
All right. Right on. So how would you describe what you're doing now?
Mostly I would say my keynotes are kind of the marketing materials to get to do more in-depth consulting with organizations, membership-based associations, or some global corporations. And then I use that crisis management kind of intersection with DEI, whether we're talking about a health and safety issue, we're talking about current events, or we're talking about an internal issue with the employees and their workplace culture.
So is it like a type of human resources? Like, is it kind of under that umbrella or adjacent or what?
Sometimes human resources will hire me. I personally think human resources is in a very strange position because they're the department that are in charge of the employees having a good work experience, but are being paid by the organization. And so ultimately the employees are having a good work experience while protecting the organization. So that's kind of a hard place to be. So I try to work more specifically with leadership, the C-suites, the ultimate leaders of the company that are deciding how to spend that organization's resources. To better the people who work there, better the stakeholders, the surrounding community, do real work. That's what I try to do.
Mm-hmm. How do you describe just DEI and why it's important? Because so many people are scared of it, like you pointed out.
I mean, ultimately, it's very hard. It's hard to come to terms with the fact that it's like Fight Club, right? Chuck Palahniuk. You're not supposed to talk about privilege. You're not supposed to talk about how easy your life is. And capitalism really wants us to fuel discontent so that we always need the next thing, or we're aware. I mean, even my friends had a helicopter pad. We didn't have a helicopter pad. Focusing on what you don't have versus what you do have keeps capitalism in place. And so when you begin to force yourself to acknowledge what you have that other people don't have, you're switching the power dynamic. And specifically as a privileged, dominant, white, cisgender person, super educated, higher economic class, to keep those things in place, I'm not supposed to acknowledge or talk about it, let alone recognize that other people don't have that. So when we start talking about people having different experiences, we have to be vulnerable enough to actually understand and recognize a problem that we're not experiencing. And then ideally, once we kind of recognize that, then we can do work from our places of power at no cost and almost no risk to actually benefit people who are really suffering. but you'd have to admit you're harming someone, even if your good intentions are on a learning curve, and really nobody wants to do that. So it's defensive making, or like a zero-sum game kind of situation. Like we feel like we're threatened or defensive, and we're going to lose something if we give it to someone else, and that's just not how it works.
So, well, I don't want to like be super contemporary throughout this interview, but I mean, I guess I got to ask, as the topic came up, and there's just so much in the news literally right now about the current administration trying to just nix all of that. So yeah. what's kind of your take on everything that's going on?
Well, the bonus of being old is this not the first time. For a lot of people, this is, and maybe this is like my first real iteration of being an old person, but for a lot of people, it's the first time that this has ever happened. But, there are articles questioning the validity of DEI trainings going back to 1929, I think, is when I stopped doing research around should they be mandatory? Should they be volunteer? Should they be internal? Should they be external? Like, we've been having these conversations forever instead of doing something about it. So then a very common trope is we don't want any of this. It's causing problems. It's divisive. The Project 2025, I just finished a big project on Project 2025. The Heritage Foundation feels that DEI programs are racist in themselves. By naming racial disparities, we are being racist. So it is illegal to discriminate. And so by having DEI programs, there is some logical loop that is existing in the Heritage Foundation that is discriminatory and racist, largely because it's cheating people out of business opportunity, because we're giving people opportunities because they're starting off in an inequitable footing. So there you go. But we did this during, or at least I did this during George Bush, the 2.0. But I was running LGBT centers and social justice centers that were being shut down or threatened to have the names closed or being fired for doing this kind of work. And it was illegal to be gay. You certainly couldn't get married. And I reached out to a lot of my colleagues from back then, and it does feel very similar. And it's just it's more unfortunate because it's a lot of people's first time, it's their first rodeo at this. But there are people who will double down, and we're already seeing lists of corporations that are doubling down on their DEI efforts because it's important to the mission of their organization. And the media likely will not focus on that. It will focus on the terrible stuff, because terrible stuff gets clicked on, not good stuff.
That is true. No, that's definitely really true. Well, you mentioned people just debate over, do we want it, do we not want it, instead of actually fixing it. What would fixing it really look like?
Do you want my real answer or my second best option?
You can do both, or whichever's your favorite.
Well, in my book, I talk quite often about the second best option because the first option is terrifying.
Okay.
So kind of.
Well, now I really want to hear both.
Kind of based on the best time to plant a tree is 300 years ago, and I screwed that up. So the second best is now, right? So now, acknowledging that you've got resources that you have the power and ability to allocate within your local community to be able to elevate your own industry and support your local community. That's what we need to be doing. That's the second best answer. The first best answer, which no one wants to do because it's scary, because we would need to reinvent something that is currently unknown. And very few people want to dismantle something enough to then build something brand new that is unknown. So even if we're talking about the fall of democracy, right, there is an opportunity for one of my, I'm probably being idealistic and optimistic. It's the font I come in. So just warning, trigger warning, I'm being an optimist right now. But one of the most important factors of a functioning democracy is dissent and questions. And so it is possible that by really critiquing duplication, inefficiencies, bureaucracy, etc., some of these systems that if they weren't being threatened by the quote other guys, we would actually be like critical of and be able to make better. When we talk about like privatized medicine, Medi-Cal, the education system, there's a lot to be critical of.
Mm-hmm.
And it is possible that we are just doing a very extreme Drano process of making democracy better at the end of this. If we can survive this, maybe it'll be better at the end. That is how I go to sleep at night, so I'm going to stick to it. But if a part of democracy is questioning and dissent, then I believe the ultimate best thing is to keep asking questions and challenge things. And so the number one thing to do is to recognize that our known reality is at the center of white supremacy, Christianity, and capitalism. And until those three things are completely dismantled, we're just reorganizing an oppressive system.
Right. No, absolutely. I mean, I
This is very heavy. Is this what you wanted this podcast to be?
Yeah, of course. Yes,
I mean, if you want
absolutely.
to check, my favorite flavor of popsicle is orange, just in case.
That's great too. I mean, there's room for that as well. Look, here's the deal. I mean, I'm not sure if you got to check the show or not, but these interviews are one or done. This is it.
Yeah.
Like I'm only going to talk to you once. Oh, I mean, I'm going to talk to you more in life, but as far
Like
as
friendly, right? No,
right,
I got that vibe.
like
I just
this is it. So yeah, it's gonna be as heavy as it needs to be.
This is
Especially
me, and this is where we're at right now. So
this is where we're at. Yeah, I mean, no, I sincerely hope you're right there. That I mean, it's just the whole notion of well, sometimes to build a new house, you really just got to burn or not burn. That's probably a bad metaphor, especially as a guy in Southern California right now. But you got to tear the other one down completely. So I get that. My concern, if we're talking the contemporary sense, is that when a status quo is clearly broken and you got to replace it, there's always that chance you replace it with something worse. And I think that, I mean, obviously in the short term, of course, that's what we're doing. But you also worry about, is this really setting the tone for generations? I mean, that's the biggest concern. I hope it's not. I hope you're right. And I'm not saying that that's for sure what's going to happen. I don't know. None of us do. I'm going to do everything in my power to make sure that's not what happens. But it is kind of an overwhelming thing.
It is definitely overwhelming. I don't know that kinda, but it to me at least it's definitely overwhelming. And I think that what's really critical is everything is needed. If let's talk about fire. So I live in Northern California where the redwoods and the sequoias are or whatever. Redwoods are flame retardant. Like the exterior bark is flame retardant and often are struck by lightning. So when you are walking around in the forest, you'll see a tree that is hollowed out and charred on the inside, but the outside still stands unless a really big wind comes and then it'll fall over and then it sprouts more trees. Excuse me. That's how redwoods seed. That's how they grow. Pine cones are very, very similar. A lot of pine cones don't release their seeds until they are hot enough that they actually kind of explode, and they need the fire and the ash in order to plant the seeds and actually create more life, right? We don't think about that because we're complaining that Easy Mac in the microwave is taking too long. So, like, that's on us, right? Like, this is nobody else's fault. We did this as a collective. It's not just, who voted for who or whatever. Like, our complacency, our entitlement, and our demand for everything to arrive by a drone in 35 seconds and not 36 seconds is where we have gotten. Do we want to blame social media for that? Sure. But we could also blame a newspaper for that or television for that. Flip phones from that. Like, there's a million things that we can blame for it. I think we need to accept it is. And I'm part of what has made that happen, So one of the things that I have really been kind of balking around is it's kind of two operational quotes. And I mean, maybe I need to come with like a caveat. Like I have a therapist, like I'm under care, but one of them is, I'm paraphrasing Audre Lorde, is that um, you can't use your own, the master will not use their own tools to dismantle the house they built.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember the first time I heard that, and I was just kind of like, let's not take it off the table. I mean, if they built it, then they could most efficiently tear it apart. And if we start thinking about ally and advocate and accomplice work, etc., isn't that what we're doing? Like, to do work from our privileged and dominant places, like we are using the resources we have to dismantle the system that gave us those resources so that we can reallocate them. So I think that that's kind of an important mindset, instead of waiting something external to happen. You are responsible for your own internal workings. So can you do that more consciously? There's also an Albert Einstein quote, which is, no problem will be solved on the level of consciousness that created it. And that means we've got to like explode some pine cones and figure out new ways of doing things. And if I am not a Trump supporter, I think it's important to mention, but if what is currently happening,
I think people probably realize that by now.
I mean,
I think
I was on a podcast like 2 months ago, and I made a joke about being a pinko commie liberal, and the guy who was like, you know, a finance bro with biceps was like, now, Jessica, like, let's not be so condescending to yourself. And I was like, you can't be a pinko commie liberal. Like, that's not even how that works. Right.
Yeah.
So then he started telling me the importance of the merit-based system versus affirmative action. And I was just like, why am I on your podcast? What is happening?
Why were you on that podcast?
Because he asked me to. And
okay.
I would say yes, right? Like, sure. It's good practice. Anyway, the best part was is that he's telling me how horrible affirmative action is, and then he tells me that he hired a woman as his VP because she was hot and a good photographer.
Okay.
And I was like, awesome. So as your vice president of your business, hot and photography, those were in the job description? Or like, which part of like merit-based promotion did that really show up? Because
what were his interview notes like? She's hot. ...
I know.
Smiley face.
Yeah, he needs a book publisher. I don't even know if you need the photography. But anyway, my point is that it is possible that if things get to a particular point, those of us that are lucky enough to survive this process, because not everyone survived the first Trump administration, and we need to remember that.
Yeah.
So if we are lucky enough to get through this process, we need to double down on what we actually think is important, because at some point in time, we thought it was a given. It's not a given right now. And it's up to us to determine what needs to be a given, or how do we codify what needs to be a given going forward.
That's heavy. And I really hope, I really hope that's where we get to, because the alternative is not great.
Right.
It is super not great. My cat is meowing. I don't know if you can hear her, but she is acknowledging.
We feel all the same way. We're screeching in horror. I get it. Tough life.
What is social justice? How would you define that?
So, thanks to Glenn Beck, we can't use that word anymore. That poor cat. Give that cat some love.
She's here. No, she knows.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, kiddo. Okay, better. The mail has already come, so my dogs have now taken nap number 3.
Oh, there it is.
So the idea of social justice came about because like multiculturalism was reduced far more to just racial inequities. It wasn't intended to do that, but during multiculturalism is when we began to argue about like what is an ethnicity versus a racial category. Because it's much easier to split hairs and pick new words than to just do something about inequitable treatment. So social justice started getting used because there's different ways we harm people that are bigger than just ethnicity and race or culture. And the idea of how we are socialized as people would be kind of starting at the beginning, and to socialize people with justice in mind acknowledges an inequitable system and our role in creating justice. So I believe that's why social justice started getting used. But back in the Bush years, social justice is the CRT of now. So nobody knew what it meant then, but now we can't use that word anymore. Critical race theory is acknowledging how race, white, and other racial identities show up in primarily history, sometimes literature, but in our kind of unconscious mind, how our imagination is informed by racial bias or other forms of oppression and what that impacts. That's critical race theory. Obviously, that's terrible, so let's stop doing that. So then that'll be the new word. Now it's DEI, which they don't
Right.
even know what DEI stands for. So meanwhile, progressives, we're adding belonging and Jedi skills to where we can include justice with equity instead of equality, diversity, and inclusion. So we're adding letters while they're catching up with pretty typical terms, even though they don't know the definitions of them.
When you go to big businesses and places like that, I mean, is everybody always happy to see you?
Always. No. I I think I'm just Southern enough to be charming. I'm just funny enough to be underestimated. And I'm usually
That's a cool. Wait, time out. I don't mean to interrupt you, but I mean, have you ever used that anywhere? That's really good. Okay, I was gonna say if that you got to write that down because that should be on your website or something. Maybe it is, and I just haven't seen it. But
well, nobody likes to be told that you're going to underestimate me, but it is like totally my secret weapon. And then the packaging, right, is that I'm like a white fat lesbian who has fun hair and is wearing polka dots. How much harm could she do? So I'm the diversity hire that you've invited in like a fairy. You've given me permission to cross the threshold. And then once I'm inside, you get 100% honesty with an expiration date, because I won't work with people longer than like 3 months max. Because that's usually enough time to find out they don't really care to begin with. It's great.
Well, what's your take on just kind of the anatomy of the United States? I mean, I know you did your master's at University of South Carolina, which is I had a cousin.
Okay.
Yeah, well, no, my cousin, he actually lives in Greenville now, which is such a neat place. Mm-hmm. And he lived in Columbia for some years too, and I loved visiting him down there. And, you know, I used to live in Nashville. That was actually when I saw you the most, was when I was living in Nashville. And it's so interesting to me, especially as somebody who used to travel the highways 45 weeks a year, mostly in the U.S. It's just so interesting to me, all the pockets that really are here and just this crazy big experiment we're all part of. And as frustrated as I've been, especially in recent times, and by recent times, I mean, you know, the past 8 years, but as frustrating as that's been, you know, there's still this sort of like tulip coming out of the cement that sort of is a lot of the United States that I'm still kind of like, I don't want to let go of. I don't know. What's your take on that as someone that's been in Texas and Arkansas and went to USC and et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, I still think it's the greatest place to live, but that doesn't make it perfect. You know, I travel all over the United States. I've done some pretty extensive international travel. I was in the Peace Corps during the fall of communism, so I have experienced another form of economics or government leadership in a country, and it's crumbling into basically democracy lie of socialism from communism to an actual democracy. So I've experienced a lot of those things, and I'm very critical of the United States and its role within itself and globally, and it's the best system that's screwed up that humans have created.
Interesting. So you're more optimistic than me then. I actually don't agree with that, but please continue.
Well, I mean, I would love to be wrong, because if there's a system that could be less bad, that would be amazing. But most of the other systems that want to be less bad, humans are greedy, and so the human is the flaw, right?
Right.
So, what I mean, can we go back before the Industrial Revolution? That's not going to happen. We're talking about doing the Industrial Revolution on Mars. Like, we're expanding our bad idea. But this is the best version of those bad ideas that I have experienced. To use your language, I love that, such a visceral way of talking about the anatomy of the United States. I'm very intrigued by the blue dot thing that I noticed in this presidential election, where like some people's homes are the blue dot in like a red neighborhood or a red county or a red state. Some cities or counties are the blue dot in a state. Sometimes the state is a blue dot in an area that is usually referred to as being more red. And there's the truth of the matter is that there are humans that are the blue dot in their relationship inside their own home. Mm-hmm. And we need to be far more understanding of how dumb we have gotten about that. That just because I live in California, true story, I was just in Texas at Billy Bob's, where my uncle does dancing, and it's the best people watching ever and really good barbecue. Mm. And this lovely woman who I was like saving her chair for her while she was dancing came back and was like doing this thing. And she's like, do the Trump chug with me. And I was like, I am unaware. What is the Trump chug? And she's like, oh, it's a dance. Come on, let's do it. And she's like, how do you not know the Trump chug? And I was like, that answer is so much longer than I'm going to share at a bar.
I'm just trying to have a good time tonight. Come on.
Yeah, I'm just going to eat my barbecue. Thank you. I have not heard of the Trump chug. And she's like, where are you visiting from again? And I said, California. And she's like, California is really turning red. And I was like, not where I live. And what I mean by that, I don't necessarily mean Northern California, although I do. I also don't necessarily mean Humboldt County, though I do. I mean, like, this address, right? Like, I'm getting bluer and bluer and bluer and bluer. And I think it's such an interesting contrast because, for example, we had a big earthquake, or even the fires in LA. People from all around the country are texting me, are you okay? Are you safe? And first off, the earthquake was like a 4.1. Like, I barely noticed it. My dog slept through it. It was no big deal. But they did test a new emergency system, which evidently got people's attention because everybody thought I'd fallen off into the ocean. Nope. That was really not even a big one. Like, it's all good. Just, we're testing emergency systems. LA fires start happening, which I think we all need to take a moment for. I still don't even truly understand how big and devastating this is.
It's crazy. Yeah.
Very, very seems to be the correct word. People calling me all over the place. Oh my gosh, are you safe from the fires? I'm 20 hours north of LA. Like, our air quality isn't even impacted by the fires. Like, we're fine. Right now, at least, we're fine. But I think what's important is it's not necessarily, I'm not yelling at my friends. Thank you for caring if you're listening to this. But we don't know how big California is.
Sure.
I live 7 hours north of San Francisco, which is referred to as Northern California. So then when I say that, people will be like, oh my gosh, how far from Canada? And I'm like, Oregon and Washington, right? Like, we don't even know our own anatomy to then be like leading the world, right? So again, I think this is an excellent opportunity to really learn and lean into what we haven't been paying attention to.
Well, if you had to just, and I know this is like a grossly oversimplified way of looking at it, so I'll give that that leeway there. But if you had to just kind of pick an ism, which one would you pick for just a better humankind?
Can I change the wording of the question a little bit?
Okay.
If I could eradicate one ill in the world, it would be literacy. Because I think the more people who could actually read and would actually read, those are two very different things. There are a lot of people who are capable of reading who do not read, but there's way more people who can't even read. They haven't learned to read. They're not allowed to learn to read. Literacy would be the first one, because you have access to information. Access to information makes you curious. So the ism is whatever has completely killed your curiosity. And that could be anything. But we have to revive our curiosity or we're doomed.
Fair enough. Yeah. So getting contemporary again, because I did peruse your Project 2025 project. Which I don't know how what was that like? First of all, just reading that entire freaking thing. Like, are you okay?
Honestly,
I mean, you read the whole thing.
That is a really appropriate question, because not only did I read the whole thing, but I'm a researcher. So every time there's no citations, there's very little research. Each chapter author did not talk to each other, and it's mostly gossipy grievances. So
I'm shocked. Can't believe it.
But they also wrote these executive orders. They've had 4 years to put these executive orders together that are also written terribly, right? So my brain definitely became Stroganoff. I don't want to underestimate what happened to my head. I don't celebrate holidays. So I spent the end of December where no one is calling or emailing. I did the accessibility settings on my computer so that it was read to me. So they don't have an audio version because they're trying to not make it accessible. So then the voice would read the pages to me. And because I'm such an auditory learner, I could hear it and then take notes. And then I've never been diagnosed with autism, but here's my Spidey skill. The information I was hearing would plinko through all the other information I had heard in all the other chapters. And then I would go back and cross-reference my notes like a psycho, because most of the chapters are dissolving a department. So the pieces of that department that they don't want to get rid of, they just threw it like a Frisbee to another department. But the chapter on that department doesn't know that that's coming. So
wow.
I kept notes on all that, and then I did a whole bunch of rabbit holes because of course I did. And then I was lucky enough to recruit just friends, just be a person who can read the English language. You do not have to be an expert, although some of the chapters I purposely recruited more qualified experts than just a friend of mine. But I would then had enough time before I recorded the interview to really just have a conversation about that individual chapter, because it was disjointed from the others. But there is also a constant bass line or, a little trumpet, "We hate China," that shows up in every chapter. When in doubt, the Coast Guard will do it. There's very interesting kind of patterns that showed up that's the kind of stuff my brain notices really easily. Mm-hmm. So then by having just a regular conversation, which is why there's 32 videos of me having a regular conversation, we could kind of back up and what is this department or agency charged with doing? Because I thought I knew, but I don't know that I knew what the Department of Commerce did. What does the Heritage Foundation say about this department? Which is rarely inclusive of everything the department does. It's just the pieces they're pissy about. And then what can we do as regular people? What kind of questions do we need to be asking? Who do we need to be looking for in our own local communities or what resources in our own local communities. So like, Department of Energy, do you know where your energy comes from? And I don't mean like the name on the bill, but I mean like, where's the plant? Like, where's the water body? Where's the nuclear plant? Where's the electrical plant that is feeding you your electricity? I don't know. Like, I don't even know where my recycling goes, but I could know. And if I'm going to be critical or supportive of things that I believe are really important to democracy, I need to know how this is showing up on my local level. So I'm super proud of it. I will admit, I was really nervous to kind of put it out into the world, not because of like getting doxxed or anything. Like, again, because of my previous jobs, I think I was kind of like prepared. This is not my first potential death threat or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But I haven't gotten any negative comments. I've only gotten supportive comments. One comment was, if you think this is really happening, you're delusional. And I'm like, okay, I'm delusional, delete. But I'm looking right now, 431 views on just the Veteran Affairs chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Like, people are using it. And I feel like that's probably the greatest form of resistance I could do, is that I demystified this thing that's been around since 1979, but for this year was used as kind of like, look, we have a plan. And they're doing it, which he did in his first term, in his first administration, and Reagan did as well in response to Carter. That's how it all started.
In Bush, Bush, there's a lot of parallels with New American Century and just all that stuff. I mean, it's all the same playbook of just, my personal take, if you had to just sum it up in one sentence, it's just, a far right fascist theocratic authoritarian state. I mean, that's basically, if you had to just sum it up, what they want.
Yeah, I don't. I think what would my attempt to be charitable. I'm an optimist and being charitable. I know I'm such a weird interview, but my attempt at being charitable is that I don't think they would identify as fascists. I think,
of course,
I think they would identify as true Milton Friedman free market economy for the business owners who are Protestant Christians. Right? Now, technically, those are apples and oranges, and fascism is kind of a garden hose, right? Like, it's kind of, it's not even a fruit. But the fundamental definitions and assumptions, some of which are actually articulated, for example, they're very pro-family, but they only mean a white, cisgender, heterosexually married family where the man is the breadwinner, the woman is the caretaker, and they call her the mother. There's no father. There's a man and a mother, and they have conceived children.
So did Mike Pence write that chapter, or was it somebody else?
No, Mike Pence did not write that chapter. But, I mean, like, it's not new, right?
Right.
But what is interesting is a straight married couple with no children, not a family. Gay people with children, not a family. Single mom with a boyfriend, not a family. And that was really empowering.
What about married couple, no children but a cat? Do we count?
No.
All right, I gotta let my wife know. Hey, we're not a family anymore. Project 2025 said so. We're out.
Get to reproducing. Whoops! I had a hysterectomy. Yeah, so there's things like that. But I wrote an article. I put the link in the chat just in case you want to put it in the show notes. But I got more hope out of Project 2025 than I thought I would. And obviously I've established that I'm pretty optimistic. But there's like 4 or 5 main themes, so I made note of those. There are definitely 5 terrifying things that I don't think my brain is ever going to recover from, that I had never thought about before.
Can you summarize those 5?
The most important one is privatizing disposal of nuclear waste.
Oh my God. Okay.
Like, I was like, what? Like, So
Jesus.
I remember Rick Perry, who was the governor of Texas, when he was in charge of Department of Energy during the first administration, he was trying to work out a deal with Texas about the disposal of nuclear waste. And like, I vaguely remember this, but again, rabbit hole research. I'm a nutcase, and I got like all of December and January to work on this. This is any business has the opportunity to bid to control the unregulated disposal of nuclear waste from anywhere, wherever they want, however they want, because there's no regulations on a local municipality level, state level, and then obviously we're going to undo anything on a federal level. That I don't know that anything else is scarier than that. And like, I'm saying this as someone who is a documented citizen, right? I am married to a trans person, so that's kind of up in the world, and we're going to destroy the planet anyway. So we're all doomed. But the frivolous profit margin focus of the disposal of nuclear waste paired with the intense increase of developing more nuclear weapons, I was not thinking about that. So that's probably the main one. Do you want me to keep summarizing the scary things, or can I get to the things that gave me hope that are actually great?
I feel like maybe we can skip ahead to the hope part.
Hope part?
I mean, because
okay.
that's kind of like my kind of closing question too is sort of like, well, what can people do in the present moment? So you can kind of maybe dovetail into that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll answer that part now. I think it is a embarrassing, possibly even humiliating time where us pinko commie liberals, we just realized, whether we know it or not, that we could be an organized minority voice in the United States, and it is up to us to figure out what we are going to do about that. And so if, like, I don't have children, so I don't think about school lunches. I don't know. Do we have a free lunch, free breakfast, summer food program? Do we have? It's going to get cut. So if we do, it's probably not coming. I don't even know where my local elementary school is. If I had kids, where would my kids be going to school right now? I have zero idea. So, like, if I don't even know where my own community is getting its electricity, where does its water come from, where do kids go to school, I know my little bubble, and my little bubble doesn't involve kids, and I flip a switch and I turn a faucet on, so then I don't have to think about anything. That is the core responsibility of wake up and figure it out. And by that, I mean, hurry up. Like, time is definitely a ticking, and they have gotten away with what they have gotten away with because we absolutely do not know the absolute basics of where we live. So there you go. There's the moral of the story. I walk you through each chapter. I walk through like a different area that we need to be thinking about. And it has heightened my awareness to a manner. Have I done any of those things yet? Occasionally. We've had some conversations, but I still don't know where the elementary school is.
Hey, that's one Google search away. You can knock that out right after this interview.
No, I should, right? There is a school on the dog walk, but I thought it was a church. I didn't even realize it was a school. Okay, the number one most happy-making thing that is written in the Mandate for Leadership Project 2025 is Texas. Please listen to this. This is a direct quote. Miscarriage treatment and ectopic pregnancy care should never be conflated with abortion services. People do not know that. They just like got rid of everything, and it specifies that miscarriage treatment and ectopic pregnancy care like matter, right? And that is actual health care. And to separate those things out, I think would fundamentally change access to women's health care if they read it. And so I am going to quote the Heritage Foundation and agree with them on that 1,000 bazillion %. As a Slytherin, the focus on loyalty to the president's agenda does touch my heart a little. However, I think that they are assuming that they have continuity of presidents with the same agenda for the rest of their lives. Insert your fascist comment earlier. And that's not how it works. You need continuity, and the pendulum swings, right? Like, we're here because of where we were with Obama. And we were critical of Obama, right? But if Obama was too far for these folks, we're still critical of Joe Biden. We're still critical of Trump. And now they get an opportunity to be critical of a conservative agenda. That's how it works. There's one other good thing I want to read, and I have to find it. But they actually identify, here it is. They actually identify, there's another quote, basic human rights to thrive. Not the Bible. The Bible didn't even make the list. Okay, here you go. Basic human rights to thrive are defined as equal and safe access to potable water, sanitation, food, education, healthcare, houses of worship, justice, pregnancy, and family resource centers, working capital, electricity, technology, and business opportunities.
And those are rights. They're defining those as rights.
Basic human rights to thrive.
Okay. I mean, that to thrive part makes me nervous. They're going to interpret that a certain way. But
they 100% are interpreting it where someone who looks like you, except isn't the thinker. You have to turn your thinker off to really get your like white dude privilege going. They're totally screwing with it, but at least it's in there, right? Like,
no, I hear you. No, I appreciate that. I mean, if you just read those two things to me and said, what text did that come from? I would not guess Project 2025. So yeah, no, I appreciate. I still don't know how you did it, but good on you. Someone had to do it. And you know what? What a finite, or no, finite's not the right word, but what a particular world. Because I knew, I was like, someone's got to just read that whole frickin' thing and dissect it. But I would not have guessed that I would know the person who did it, or one of the people who did it. I'm sure you're not the only one, but I bet there's less than 10.
Yeah,
I bet it's like you and 8 other people.
To get through the entire thing, 100. Like, absolutely. I mean, there's a guy who I think is actually a Trump supporter on YouTube who was reading it aloud, and he stopped at chapter 7. But he really stopped at chapter 3, and the last 4 were like AI voices. I sent whoever that guy is. I sent you $50 on your Patreon, by the way, just to thank you for like the work that you did do, even though you probably voted for the wrong president. Because to be able to listen to it helped me take notes. And then I eventually realized Apple products have accessibility things. So then I learned how to do that, so it would talk to me as if I couldn't see it.
Where can people go to learn more about you?
My therapist is available.
You got a good one?
I do. She's amazing, and I've had her for 18 years. Yeah,
nice.
During COVID, like TikTok had a trend that was ask your therapist what they think we should talk about. That worked. That like got us to a whole new level. You can, any social media, Jess Pettitt, or Good Enough Now is the name of my business. Instagram, Jess Pettitt is a lovely woman who is a swimmer and very athletic, and that is the wrong one. That is not me. So I'm Good Enough Now on Instagram. But LinkedIn, Jess Pettitt, JessPettitt.com is my website. The new book is called Almost Doing Good, because I believe deeply that we can do the best we can with what we've got some of the time, because it's better than nothing never.
Jess, thanks so much for doing this.
Oh my gosh, thanks for having me. Like, delete file immediately.
That was Jess Pettitt. Check out all of her stuff. The 2025 Project, if you dare. Wow. Music for the 1000 podcast is provided by Andrew Saxon. Be sure to check out his podcast, the Baywatching Podcast, wherever you get your podcasts. Leave us a 5-star review, would you? We're still a very, very new podcast in the scheme of things. Every 5-star review helps and goes a long, long way. And if you want to support this show on the sustainability end, you can do so over at patreon.com/RobLacone. For a give what you can level, you get all kinds of exclusive content. You get the 1000 episodes before they're released. You get episodes from the vault. I recently released an old interview with W. Kamau Bell before he got his show. And we do a Zoom hangout once a month. It's a really cool community we have over on Patreon. And you can become a member for as low as $1 a month, and you help keep this show on the air and help other future productions, documentaries, films, etc. All right. We are almost at 75. We're almost at a quarter of a tenth. I didn't factor in the math that would be involved with this series. Didn't think that one through. Math, not my thing. You're gonna see me stumble on stuff. That's gonna happen. All right. Catch you next week. Hey guys, Ron Placone here. Take your own 1000 challenge. No, you don't need to interview 1,000 people, although if you want to do that, go for it. Your 1000 challenge can be whatever you want. Maybe you want to call a friend out of the blue once a week. Maybe you want to read a book every month. Maybe you want to start a different garden every season. I guess that might be dependent on where you live. Look, the point of the challenge is taking on an endeavor that enriches your life in some way, and it can be measured. And then, of course, you do it regularly. That's what 1000 is doing for me, and hopefully for you too. The main reason for this podcast and every podcast I've ever done is to build community. So take your own challenge. Then join our Facebook group. It's called 1000 What's Your Challenge? ? That's 1000 What's Your Challenge ? And post about what your 1000 challenge is and the progress you're making. All I ask is that people be encouraging of each other's challenges. This is personal and vulnerable, so be cool. There's enough negativity on social media. We don't need to add to it. For those of you who aren't on Facebook, hopefully in the future we'll be expanding to places like Discord, Reddit, but for now, we're starting on Facebook. And again, that Facebook group is called 1000 What's Your Challenge? See you there.